Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Sunday of ESAR Star Club. We are happy to have you here during this Mercury retrograde. I hope everyone's doing well on the cusp of a full moon. So we are in for a treat. We have one of my favorite astrologers. See, he didn't even know I was going to say that.
I did.
Coming on, Michael Erlewine, who has been, so creative in the field. So we're really happy to have him here today. Also, I just want to remind you that if you have paid $9.95 to come in and check out this lecture, I believe you may have paid too much. Not because Michael isn't going to give us extraordinary value. It's because if you were a member of ESAR, you would already have access to this for free. So I do want to encourage you to take advantage of our membership in terms of what you get, in terms of discounts, and also access to our library, all the wonderful things that ESAR offers. I also want to remind you that you're still within a window, I think either today, but a window to be able to register for our ESAR 22 conference coming up in August. I know you want to be there. I think it will be the second, we hope, live conference for this year. First being NORWAC, and then also being ESAR. But we are looking forward to our international community descending on Westminster, Colorado, and coming together and enjoying our mutual learning together. So we do hope you come out. A few reminders and some housekeeping. As you all know who have attended before, that your cameras and your mics are not going to be on, but if you have questions, you can ask them in the question box. Michael has agreed to take any clarification questions. If there's something he's saying that isn't clear, then I can read those off to him. But for the most part, he's taking questions at the end of his presentation, which will be about 75 minutes from now. So with that said, if there are no other concerns, questions, I'm going to introduce our wonderful speaker. I'll just say this before I read his official bio. One of the reasons why I appreciate Michael so much is that he's, looked at various forms of astrology and also come up with his own insights from heliocentric astrology. He's also looked in terms of, some Buddhist ideas in relation to astrology. So it's just a testament to his mind and how he's been interested in things, to his wonder as an astrologer, as a teacher, as an educator. So here's something that Noel Teal, who was the author of 34 books on astrology, he had this to say about Michael Erlewine. Michael Erlewine is the giant influence whose creativity is forever imprinted on all astrologers' work since the beginning of the computer era. He is the man who single-handedly applied computer technology to astrological measurement, research, and interpretation, and has been the formative and leading light of astrology's modern growth. Erlewine humanized it all, adding perception and incisive practical analyses to modern computerized astrology. Now, for a second generation of astrologers and their public, Michael Erlewine's genius continues with StarTypes, and it's simply amazing, which I agree with. So with that said, I will disappear. I didn't introduce myself. My name is Sam Reynolds on the board of directors for ESAR, and give it all the way to Michael Erlewine. Thank you.
So Sam, can they see me?
They can see you fine.
Okay, cool. Also, I'll just start out with, my name is pronounced Erlewine.
Oh, thank you. Erlewine.
Just for the heck of it.
All these years.
What? Well, you did it wrong all these years, not my problem, right? Okay, so I'm going to try to present to you what's taken me about 50 years to work out. And before I start, I'm going to have my own little time period here of what Sam called housekeeping. I want to go over some of the stuff that you might want to have when this is over that's free, in case we don't have time to talk about it, or whatever. So I'm going to start with that. We're calling this StarTypes Life Path Partners, but I also have a book called Dharma Chart, which is your Helio chart, and Karma Chart, which is a standard chart that we all have used. Where to get those? The name, my main site is Spirit Grooves, which you can see up here. Hopefully you can see stuff. spiritgrooves.net or .com or whatever. And if you go there, there's a thing that says free ebooks. And all you have to go there, and then you'll have about 56 or 57 books just on astrology that are all free. And these are just the beginning of some, but I think there's a total of 550 books here. I'm not just an astrologer. Some of them are on music. A lot of them are on Dharma, which I've studied and practiced for 50 years, studied astrology for 60 years plus. So the books that you want to go with this talk are going to be this one. It looks like this, just StarType Life Path Partners. And this is a very visual technique. I've worked out the mathematics, of course, a long time ago, but to make it easy for people, anyone can use the technique I'm going to present to you because it's mostly visual. It has a backup of logic and calculations, but I've reduced it over all these decades, actually. So that's one book, and the other one is this one. It's Dharma Chart, Karma Chart. Give it a look. Also, on YouTube, I have 375 videos. Not all, some of them are on music, and some of them are on photography, which I'm deep into, and a lot of them are on Dharma. But there's a lot of them on, including this talk. It's also just videos, if that's what you would like. Also, just for those of you who have asked me what's happened to the Heart Center Astrological Library, here's a picture of it. It's no longer there. It now is at the University of Illinois as part of their permanent collection. In fact, in the last year or so, as I'm getting increasingly older and more health problems, I've been able to place all of my different music, film. I created the largest music database in the world. It's called allmusic.com, and one of the two largest film databases called allmovie.com, but also a lot of other stuff. So they're now, some of the artwork that we produced here at our Dharma Center are at the Rubin Museum of Art in New York City. Others are at the University of Michigan's Bentley Historical Library. And I won't bother you with them, but a lot of them, I can feel good that all of my stuff is gone. They came and hauled this library away with a huge Allied van truck and then a UPS truck size, just full of my papers and correspondence and stuff. So I got like nothing left. But also, I'm totally tired of it anyway. So then I want to go give you a little bit of history about where this technique came from. The first book that I published was called The Sun is Shining. And what it is a heliocentric ephemeris that you can use with a calculator, 4-function calculator, that gives you very accurate positions from 1653 to 2050. This is the first thing I did. And then in that year and the next year, I produced these things, which I'm going to run through really quickly. One is the ephemeris that we're talking about here. Then a book on cosmic structure called Astrophysical Directions, but I'll run through that. Let me just do that. There's my original cover of this interface planetary nodes, is heliocentric nodes, how all of the planetary orbits fit one to another so that we have many, many different nodal points. This is a very powerful technique. And here's my more modern book of it, just because it's better, and it's also free. And also in 1976, I published a book on the left, Astrophysical Directions. Now it's called Astrology of Space because, it makes more sense. And I also published 7 star maps, both on the ecliptic and on the equator. This is the equator map. All of this was done without computers. All this was done with press type. I spent years doing this. In fact, I used to organize all of my charts like these binders. These binders are now in the library of Illinois, but these are all arranged chronological, and I'll show you what I did. I would draw out two charts. One would be the heliocentric, which I'm going to talk about. And please stop thinking I'm just a heliocentric. It's just an alternate chart. I use both charts all the time, the one that you're used to and the one you may or may not be used to. So on the right, we have the helio, and on the left, we have the geo. I even had special paper made. This is just another one of my own chart. My wife has wonderful handwriting for doing this, but I don't, but this is what I do. So here I have helio, geo, the interface thing we just talked about, and also two other charts on the back side of the page, just the local space chart. I developed a technique in the 70s called local space, which I think is part of most astrological software, but I don't think they credit me anymore. But I did the same thing that Jim Lewis did. I made a story of it, and I made it very easy to use. And then on the right is the equatorial charts, which we use for mundane astrology and stuff like that. Some of you are going to want to look at your heliocentric chart after we talk. Here's a free way to do that. It's just called astrologyland.com. It's a website I built when I sold my company to my good friends, David and Faye Cochran. They're my dear friends, and I think they're doing a great job with it. I'm no longer connected to it in any way, but on this site, you can see there's a free chart interpretation. Let me just get this so I can keep going through here. If you click through, you get to a chart like this, and if you click on down here where it says Helio, and you enter your data, and you say calculate, it will produce your chart. This is my heliocentric chart, which is very different than my standard geo chart. As you can see, I have 6 planets creating a grand trine quite exactly, not white orbs. And it will also produce a little interpretation for you, just free online. So here's an example of it. You know, my star type is called the entrepreneur, which I certainly am. I've started many different businesses, not just astrology, but film, music, rock and roll posters, Dharma stuff, but that's never was a business because I never made any money from it or tried to. So, okay, there's that. Now, the last program I did before I retired is called Blue Star. And I did it many years ago, but this is all, and I'm not connected to this. I mean, I don't get a kickback from this, but I went to Faye and David and said, if I give this talk and I talk about this program, will you give them a break? And they said they'll give you $100 off, so you could get it for 99 bucks. And it has built into it many different written interpretations, that mostly which I did, as well as a wonderful way of displaying data and stuff. It's the last thing I did, and I did it for me, knowing I wasn't going to be programming anymore, but I needed something to use as long as I'm able to do that. So if you look at this crazy number, this is what they gave me. If you want to write that down and you have an interest, that's going to save you $100. So I'll pause just so long enough that one or two of you might want to write that number down, or you can email me or something and I can send you the number, something like that. So that's almost all my housekeeping. Oh yeah, also in that program, I also interpret each of these in quite a, not thoroughly, but pretty thoroughly. So all that stuff is built into that. And we'll look at that program, or we could look at it now. Briefly, let me just see. Yeah, here's how the program works. There's my Helio chart. There's my geo chart. We're going to look at these. You can see they're very different looking charts. And what we're looking for here is all the stuff we already know, but we're also looking for what I call whole chart patterns. That means Ptolemaic aspects, basically, that go all the way around the chart and create a pattern. This would essentially be something similar to what Mark Edmund Jones called a basket type. And of course, this is, Grand Trine. Also, there are all of these interpretations, which you see on the left. I wrote all the text for, I think, all of them. Actually, I wrote all the text. And there's Saturn reports, and there's that. I guess I don't want to do that. The life chakra report is just the inclinations and disinclinations. We talk about the inclinations, but we never look at how the different coordinate systems we use are also differently inclined one to another. I think it's a huge thing. We always say, above as below, that, but after another manner. The after another manner is the inclination. At least I found that was very, very useful. So I'll close this for now because I don't need it. Okay, now we're ready. I'm sorry to tell you all that. I don't think there's anything more I have to tell you. There isn't. Obviously, I know about this chart. This is my chart. I have nothing whatsoever on the eastern side. I have all Western stuff. Even Neptune is conjunct the midheaven, and my northern node is conjunct the midheaven and Neptune. Also, my 3 planets, Uranus, Saturn, and the moon, are just a few degrees apart. But in local space, that means if you walked outside at my birth time, or my dad carried me out, or mom or something, but must have been my dad, and you looked, you see that all of these planets are conjunct in the sky within a half a degree or just minutes. But in the work that I do, I seldom, if ever, use that. Hang on. I always use this kind of a wheel. It's called a 360-degree wheel. Let me just see. Here's a couple of them. I have to kind of hurry through this because this is a kind of a long technique to learn, but it's going to get easier from here. We just went through all the housekeeping stuff, as I mentioned. So you can see on the left here is my Helio chart. Now let's just talk about Helio for a minute without you think I'm doing propaganda. I use many different charts. I think one of the saddest things that there is in astrology is that we have one chart. There's a great jazz tune by Les McCann and Eddie Harris called "Compared to What." It's a beautiful piece of music, but we have nothing to compare it. All these years we've tried to suck all the sense we can out of a single chart, when the truth is that a group of charts, the Helio chart is one way of looking at your birth moment, and the same planets in the same exact second as the geo. And local space is even a more in your face. I used to call it vulgar. It's where the rubber meets the road. Very powerful. But each of these different systems, an equatorial, right ascension, and declination you can use too, together they give you essentially a multi-dimension or like a 3-dimension view of you. I mean, when I think back over all the years that I spent trying to extract from my geocentric chart, the one that I grew up with, this was way before computers. Everything was done by hand, log tables and ephemerides and stuff like that. I just wonder how it's like different algebras. Different algebras bring out certain information and suppress others. Each of these coordinate systems brings out certain things in us and suppresses the rest. That's what this is about. So I am a heliocentric astrologer. I could tell a brief story. The brief story would be in the 1980s, because of the diaspora in Tibet, many of the great Rinpoches came to the West, and many of them came to this country. And because my wife and I ran a Dharma center called the Heart Center KTC, Karma Texum Cherling, they would come here because they had nowhere to go for a number of years. I mean, it's not like they had nowhere to go. It's like they came and did this until their own monasteries were reestablished, or places in this country. And when they came here, I would always pick on them nicely, but I'm sure it was a pest, because I was trying to understand the nature of Tibetan astrology. And in that process, I found out that because of the diaspora and because of aging and people, some of the senior astrology monks, which are called sipas, had died or could no longer function, that one of the calendars, the lineage I'm in is called the Karmapa, just like the Dalai Lama is the 14th Dalai Lama, the Karmapa is the 17th Karmapa. So it's the oldest reincarnate, quote unquote, lineage. And so I felt badly that they're running out of calculations, and I've been producing and have, well, my brother Stephen and I produced an astrological calendar for 42 years. And then eventually AFA took it over and continued publishing it. But I was also for many years producing a Dharma calendar, a practice calendar. And so I found out that the Tibetans use different, I know this is more than you want to know, but you're going to get to know it anyway. The Dalai Lama has his own calendar. And the Sirpu calendar, which is part of my lineage, is a different one, and the Chinese calendar is a different one, and they can be up to 1 month different. So this kind of blew my mind. And so what I ended up doing was bringing over a Sipa, a young monk who was trying to put these calculations back together, and together we would work on it. And then suddenly my Dharma teacher, who passed away a couple of years ago, but I was with him for 36 years, did not speak English. So I had to learn to read Tibetan, not very well, but as best as I could. He called us in for an interview, which we did every year when we would drive to Woodstock, New York, to the monastery there. And he says, guess what? He didn't say guess what, but he said, I want you to go to Tibet and meet His Holiness, the Karmapa. And of course, I'm a homebody. I don't even like to go to the grocery store. So I said, well, Rinpoche, of course, it's my intention to do that. I would like to go and see His Holiness. I said, He says, I want you to go now, within a month. And we did. When your Dharma teacher tells you something, it's not a simple request. You have to trust him. And I certainly was totally worth it. So I also took my wife and 3 of my kids, and we went there. And I'm just trying to get to a little Helio thing here. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have bothered to do this. But when we got there at 15,000 feet, we finally got to meet him and go in before him and stuff. And in the process of, and we had a translator who was our guide, Pemba, which means Saturday. We went there, and he turned to me and he says, you're Tanzanima. And well, I didn't know what that means, but our guide said, he says, you are, Tanzanima means holder of the sun or keeper of the sun. Of course, as a Helio astrologer, which he would have no idea that I can imagine, other than he's the Karmapa, so maybe he has whatever he has. It was totally blew my mind. I'm sorry to take that. Anyway, trying to come back here. When I was first programming astrology, I first programmed it. And remember, there were no disk drives, there's no printers. I had a 65-pound teletype machine as a printer. And I had a little tiny 8K computer, which I had a complete program running on it very fast. But then I had to do many other things. Not only was I programming the stuff I was interested in, but I would record these tapes, because they were just on cassette tapes, and then verify it. And pretty soon, and I would give them away. I gave them away free. I even paid for the postage. Or maybe I asked for the postage, I can't remember. But I eventually realized that I was spending my whole days doing that. I wasn't doing any more study or research or anything. And also I had family now. I had 2 little kids, which made me want to be able to provide for them, so that I became a business company. As part of the company, I had to program all kinds of stuff I didn't know about just because someone else wanted. I am a great user of transit, but I never have gotten very much out of progressions. And probably my best friend in astrology then, and now he's passed on, is Charles A. Jane. And Charles loved solar arc direction. So I would, of course, try my best to use solar arc directions, but I never got any response. So, but anyway, I had to program all this stuff. And one of the things I had to program was heliocentrics. I didn't know it. It's just another coordinate system. I mean, why would I want to know what happens on the sun, right? Because I'm on Earth. So I did that. I calculated the chart. This was before computers, as I mentioned, and that's why I created a little heliocentric ephemeris, so I could do it easily, or so that you could do it easily. And as I begin to study, and here on you can see the two charts. I was used to this one over here on the right. That's me. But that's all the me that I knew. But suddenly I had a whole nother way of looking at me. Then what's that, right? Who is that? And that's really what it is. It's who is that? Well, the long story short is that over a period of time, not too long, months, I begin to transmigrate or transfer my consciousness, my identification of astrology from my geochart onto my Helio chart, because it was much more interesting to me than the geochart. And also was very, very much more exact. And where are you going to find that many trines, 6 planets worth, that are pretty exact? So it wasn't long before I was thinking from the point of view of my Helio chart as to who I am. And over many years, that's never faded. That's only gotten stronger. I'm both charts, but I call the heliocentric chart your Dharma chart. It's a chart, it's the Dharma path that you're going to go on. Or you could say, or not, I'll just reverse it. I call our standard chart the karma chart, because as it turned out for me, my study is that the geo chart is a chart of our the circumstances in which we're born, our karma. But the person that's born there, at least my person, is your Helio chart. So suddenly I had two charts. I had something to compare to. I had this Helio being that I was somehow connected. And then I had the mask or the persona or the self or the karma, the circumstances in which I was born. And the two went together like hand and glove. Well, this became very interesting to me. And well, I was busy doing all these different kinds of regressions, all this programming that I had to do and that I wanted to do. But I also began to develop this technique. And it slowly became the most important thing, short of just doing computers in general, which I was not the first person to do it. I was the first person to share it with other people freely. So I spent about 40 years perfecting this technique, and that's what I'm here for, is to tell you about it. I don't expect everyone to like it, but all I can say is it's extremely potent technique, and anyone can do it. And I'm going to try to show you why that is and how that is, as I ramble along here. So that's how I got into Helio. And but of course, people begin to say that I'm heliocentric astrologer, which is not. Yeah, I am, but I'm also a geocentric astrologer and a local space astrologer, and using deep space. In 1976, I published, the Astrology of Space. I think I was the first person to ever look at all the deep space matter and to put it into our astrological framework. So, longitude and latitude and stuff like that. So, anyway, now I'm ready to go on. So once again, this is just a picture of my, geo chart. And then there's the same picture of that, just to simplify it. And I'm going to try to move some of this up so that I can be useful. Okay, I'm not going to spend a lot of time in this because it's so easy to get confused. Just let yourself get confused. Or you can go study it, which I did. So that's the heliocentric. So why would we even be interested in the heliocentric? And it took me a long time to figure this out. Well, for one thing I learned is that, and let me go to the geocentric. Here's the geocentric. The geocentric is a view of the solar system from Earth. We know that. But it's a warped view in the sense it's not the center of the system. The sun is the center of the system. So if we want to really look at what was going on at the moment you were born, you want to look at the heliocentric chart. The bottom line is that after 30 or 40 years of studying this thing, those astrological patterns made by the actual planets as they moved around, as they orbit the Earth, the sun, those are very, very exactly more powerful in my experience. And you have to see for yourself. Don't trust me. It's not true because I'm telling it to you. I'm telling it to you because that's the best truth that I've ever found, is that we need to know what our pattern is, what the sun was doing. And I've gone on in modern years, I've become very, very, and written a number of books and videos about, and it's really sad. It's sad that astrologers pay no attention to solar flares, CMEs, or solar wind. It's the closest thing to us, and it's inundating us constantly, and especially in the next couple of years, it's going to become very strong. I'm ashamed that we don't, as a group, that we aren't skilled in it, and I'm ashamed of myself. I wasn't until, I don't know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, or something like that, begin to pay attention to it. A lot of that was thanks to my friend, Theodore Landscheid. Theodore Landscheid, I was interviewed by an interviewer, an astrologer guy, nice guy, but he couldn't believe that I wasn't influenced by all these books, especially since I have all the books there are, almost. And I tried to explain to him, the only person, even my good friend Charles Jane, he would fly to my house, I would go to his house. Now I lost my train of thought. So, but then anyway, yeah, my mind is a little weird. I just had a stroke 2 days ago. So I'm in good shape. Nothing's wrong with me, but I'm still putting the pieces back together a little bit. But no, I was talking about Landscheid. I was saying that, show this guy that Landscheid is the most visionary astrologer that I've ever met. He's come to my house, and I sent him his first computer in 1978 because he couldn't get one. I sent him a Commodore PET all the way to Germany, for which he did a lot of his research on. But the point is that I just simply have not learned. I've learned a little bit. I learned from Grant Louie, heaven knows what. No, Astrology for Millions. That's a brilliant book, even though it sounds like it's a public book that, just for general public. It's not. But Theodore Landscheid's book called Cosmic Cybernetics is a brilliant, brilliant view of the future of astrology. It's kind of hard to read. And then toward the end of his life, the astrologer, Robert and Ellen Schmidt came and lived with us for a number of years. When he left, he'd become an astrologer just because we'd had many discussions, just like we're doing now. And he also was a physicist, a mathematician to a great degree, and he also was fluent in Germany. So Theodore Landscheid has a book called Children of the Light, and it's about the effects of solar radiation especially solar flares and CMEs, which are corona mass ejections. Huge bunch of energy thrown at Earth, which are happening now. So he translated that book, and I have it. I haven't published it because I don't know if I have any right to do it, but certainly some people, I have shared it, so it might be shared around, or you might be able to get it from me, but you should read it simply because he goes into a lot of the great creative geniuses that we've had in our lives, and how they were influenced by sudden ejections of solar mass energy. It sounds crazy, but it's not. But anyway, he totally influenced me. The rest of my stuff mostly came out of my own mind. One of the things that I learned studying Tibetan Buddhism very carefully and doing all of the practices more than once, some of them take years, was that here my mind went blank again. So it's kind of interesting. Anyway, what I started out to say is that I've gone my own way. I found my own way of discovering. I find the place to find. This is why I love Robert Schmidt, but we didn't talk about his Greek work. We were very close friends. We talked about other stuff because I'm not that interested in the past astrology because it's very hard, at least for me, to decipher. Much easier is just to go into your own mind. Everything that ever came out of the mind, every piece of, every word, every task, every thought, all came from the present moment. And in that present moment is like a wish-fulfilling gem. All of my creative stuff, which I'm trying to explain some to you, all came out of my mind, right? You can do that. We can do that. And now, yeah, I guess I have to proselytize a little tiny bit. I have to say that it's sad to me that 500 years ago or so, when Copernicus pointed out to us that everything doesn't revolve around us. Everything doesn't revolve around the Earth. In fact, it revolves around the sun. And astronomers who were astrologers, I mean, just is roughly speaking, and astronomers and astrologers were astronomers, but they split up at that point gradually. But we astrologers, as we know it, we kept to the geocentric chart only. We just couldn't be bothered with the heliocentric chart, but the astronomers were, and having two charts is what I'm trying to tell you about now. Only I'm trying to tell it to you as an astrologer, not as an astronomer, although I know enough astronomy to calculate it and stuff like that. So it's very, very sad that all this time, the astronomers walked away with two charts, and they took they were empowered. So today they live really well. I think the two oldest disciplines are botany and astronomy, but not astrology. I mean, it gives me great pain. Plus, I also started with nothing. I did readings for 9 years, lived on the edge of a shoestring. There's something to that. And so I'm not going to beat you about the head or anything about it, but I do want to point out to you that we've taken a misstep as astrologers. We need to correct that. And I'm not saying that the heliocentric is everything, but I'm saying having more than one way of looking at ourselves, having something to compare to, is very precious. And that we really should look into it and become empowered. I was empowered by studying my Helio chart. I mean, changed my life forever, and made me a much more capable human being. Anyway, enough said. So now just take a look at here. Here we're just looking at the two views. Here's the Earth, and my Earth is in Aries. It doesn't quite fit there, but it is. It's at 9 degrees Aries, but from the sun's point of view, my Earth is in Aquarius. Now, of course, I started out saying, "Oh, wow, that's cool," and I could say, "Well, I'm a kind of a hothead." I am geocentrically, but maybe my impulsiveness does an Aquarian something or other. So that's how I started looking at heliocentric chart, trying to do all the things I would do having grown up with the geocentric chart. Just do it there. Take my technique, go to astrology, go to the helio and have at it. But in the process of doing that, not particularly more interesting than it was in the regular. We all get the most we can, and probably we all are as crazy as to want to look at our own chart as much as possible to use it as some kind of guidance, which is what I use astrology for. Then, in the process of doing that, something else happened to me, and that something else is what I'm finally getting around here to tell you about. That I suddenly realized that all of that stuff, this is conjunct this, or this is within an orb of that, and all the stuff I was used to doing, what was really coming out of the blue, but a huge effect on me was that, hey, all these planetary aspects seem to form patterns. I'm not the first person to look at patterns. Mark Edelman Jones did, Rudyard did. In fact, Rudyard and I had a conversation. He came to my house one time, and I said to him, and he was a pretty amazing guy. I said to him, probably more than I should about heliocentrics, because I was already, down the rabbit hole. And he kind of poo-pooed it, said that heliocentrics not very important or something. So then he went on, he gave a little talk, and we had some refreshments or whatever. And then later he came up to me, and he looked like he was like in a trance. I think he was in a trance, and he took it all back. He said all the things about heliocentrics that I thought. Now, maybe he read my mind. I have no idea, but suddenly he was like 100% for it on how important it was. And so I'm just saying that, well, one, I'm saying it's important, but the importance I'm talking about here is that I begin to see the whole chart patterns. And if you can see, look, let's take another look. It's just another view of the same thing. It just shows you, but I think I'll do, yeah, here's for Venus. My Venus is in Virgo heliocentrically, but it's in Leo geocentrically. What I'm trying to do with all this, and I'll just flip through some of these. I came up with 60 different major patterns, simply using the simple Ptolemaic aspects, squares, trines, sextiles. And I begin to, I begin to do all of my family and all of the famous people I knew and to look at their patterns. And I begin to, this was just a Circle Books calendar of 1976. So I was doing this in 1976 for sure, but actually I was doing it much earlier. This is just when I'm sharing it. And I can just tell you one anecdote that, I hope helps. So that one of the things I did, I wanted to do the heliocentric charts of all of the people that I didn't get along with, the ones that I didn't like or that didn't like me. So I did maybe 15 or 20 of them. When I looked at them, all of them had almost the same chart that I did. So what did I get out of that? I got out that I didn't like myself all that much, and I didn't like somebody who was like myself. And I was able to change that through that realization. And this is the kind of realization that I feel this technique does. And over time, I began to draw out, and I came up with a name for each one. And it wasn't a name, just foolish name. It was actually looking at thousands and thousands of charts. And once the computer came along, it was much easier for me to do, of course. so I did them like that, and then I made tarot cards out of them. Came up with the little pictures in them. I didn't have time or the ability to really draw stuff, so I just took clip art. It still would give you a flavor. And I did different ones for guys. Let me see if I can move this up here. And gals. And I also did it just for neither, just for events. So what I'm trying to say is I just, here are all 60 of them. Now, this should be easier from now on. I mean, and I divided them into 4 basic groups. Maybe I could get that up. 4 different groups. Where am I going to find that? Now I guess we'll go. Okay, I know what I want to do. I just have to do it. Let's see. Yeah. Here's what I learned. If you boil the whole damn thing down, the question to ask yourself, and this is heliocentric chart only. Geocentric is like through a glass darkly. The geo can look a lot like the helio, and then we can say the same thing, but often it's simply not, like in the case of my chart. What you want to know is, heliocentrically speaking, are there any T-squares or grand crosses in your helio chart? Not are there individual squares, 90 degrees. Those are fine. Those can be measured too, but when these aspects link up to form a pattern. So here you can just see that. Is there a T-square in this chart? Yeah. Is there one in this chart? No. There's an opposition, sextile, and a trine, which is called a wedge. And same here. There's a T-square, there's a wedge, or you could just have an opposition type thing, like a cluster of arrows. And that's another thing. So the first question to answer is there a T-cross, not as just a square, or a grand cross in the helio chart? If there is, then that, let me see if I can get back to this. Then I developed, I gave all of those kind of cards a red border so that we could spot them easily. And I drew the pattern in that they actually had, because there's many different ways of using squares, T-squares. And then I came up with a family tribe, a tribe name. In this case, it's the loved one. I found out that we can think of a grand trine as being outside, encapsulating the whole thing. And we can think of a square or a grand cross as being on the inside, accenting the center. In fact, a grand trine is the most effective way of avoiding sending a cross through the center of the chart, period. So that's what I did. Now I can, where do I find that? Oh, there. Yeah, here's just some more of it. Just different ways. There's different ways to have, and I call this, I did a study of astrophysical theoretical physicists, astronomers. A great many of them, especially with gravitational theory, a great number of them, like Roger Penrose and people like that, who talk about black holes and gravitational theories, end up having grand crosses in their helio chart. Whatever they are, or I can say someone with a grand cross in their helio chart is like the center of a group, like a movie star, or center of attention, while someone like myself is grand trine is much more like a wallflower. I'm seeing the forest and the trees from the outside. The grand trine is a way of taking it all in. But the thing that's at the center evolving are the squares. Not the regular squares, but these kind of squares. So these are called loved ones. This whole family is called that. Let's see if I can find out where that is again. Okay, the other second group are green bordered. This has a trapezoid, which is like a grand trine, but different. Trapezoids are not as balanced. They are absolutely correct in terms of their genius or ability, but they seem to always come at it from another angle. And we could get into this, and the books that I said are filled with nothing but that. And they also have, one of them, I think they both have a little ephemeris at the back for this century, showing you what your geo and helio types are. So I'm trying to make it as easy as I humanly could. Now, okay, some examples. Famous green, I call these green lines, as Margaret and I do, just because that's what happened. Mystic rectangles turns up in psychology, in psychologist charts. I don't know why, I'm just telling you. This is like my geo chart here. Great receptivity, it's like a dish, a radar dish. And all of these little wedges turn up a lot in caregivers, doctors, nurses, people who are taking care of others. Now, I would think that if you did the work I did, you'd come up with something similar, but very different, right? So that my taste isn't going to be your taste. So I'm not trying to say you should do what I do. I'm saying this is what I found out. Go find out for yourself. And I've tried to make it easy. You know, it's totally easy, relatively. Now, what about if somebody has both in their chart? These are independent types. If they have both a grand trine and especially and a grand, a T cross or a grand cross, especially if they're linked together, these are what we call an independent type. I've done a lot of counseling, even though I stopped being a counselor, I still do a lot of counseling because family, extended family, people coming through, it's one of the things they asked me to do. So I'm not out of shape with it. But what I did find out is that this independent type, they don't really need other people so much. Somebody that just has a grand trine like me really needs other people. And somebody who has a grand cross also really needs, but if you have both of them, you pretty much have both sides of the equation. I find that these people really don't need other people. And sometimes if you're counseling and you find someone that's an independent type, it's a great, relieves them to know that they don't have to feel so bad, that they're not as interested in their partner as the partner it may be in them, that idea. I mean, I'm getting down to where the rubber meets the road, but that's what I do anyway. So, these would be things like this. You find this in craftsmen. You find this pattern. People that can do almost anything. This is one. I have a friend that has this chart, and he's just a prodigious worker, but he can't seem to get married. He can't seem to. These people don't need other people as much, except you can take another chart pattern and put it with it, and it will work. Or you can have two people who have the same kind of chart pattern. My wife and I do. I have a grand trine. She has a basket, all green lines. So we're more like, I hate to say this, monks and nuns. We're similar, but we probably don't have, we still argue plenty, but we don't have quite the dynamism of, sounds bad, but it's not bad. It's just what you want, where you're comfortable. Then there's one last type. I mean, you can make many types, but I have a daughter that's this way. These are what I call multi-relational charts. Like I have a daughter that has all the planets less than 100 and some degrees in Helio altogether. And she has this chart, number 38. Or actually, it's even tighter than that. It's like that. These people And she travels. She's a traveling musician, well known in the Midwest, singer-songwriter. You know, she's opened for many famous people, Lyle Lovett, and she's been on Prairie Home Companion, all that kind of stuff. But she never, and she's driving. I could never do that. I don't want to go anywhere. Why would I leave a perfectly good home, is my view. But she's going, I just talked to her today. She's on her way from Chicago back here, I guess, tomorrow morning. So those are the 4 basic types. Just another way of looking at them. Grand Trine's the paradigm of the lover, the green lines. The loved one is always a T-square, independence always a combination, and those that are collapsed. And also something I could explain to you, it's not totally related, but I'm still knocked out by it, is that if you just look at a chart, if the planets are evenly distributed, that means that the different gaps between the planets are equal, you know, like a nonagon, something like that. Heliocentrically, that's an incredible amount of stability. They can have whatever you want as a geocentric chart, and they look crazy, but they're very, very steady and patient, and they're unmovable. So I don't know whether you found that out, but if you haven't, go look. I found that out that the moment I see that in a chart that somebody's got, you know, otherwise we are driven, like my daughter, which would be like this chart, absolutely spends her life trying to fill in that huge gap. Again, I'm winging it, but I'm saying that's what I've always done. I've always wung it, or whatever the word is. So I'm not that way. I'm like this chart. I have equal. So I may be a crazy person, but inside I'm very steady. Really can think things through, that kind of stuff. So I'm just sharing this with you. So there's just some more stuff like that. I think I'll get through that. I think we've seen all this. Loved one chart types, lover. These are the green lines again, and so forth. Now, let's see. Oh, I do have one more thing that I have to tell you. I have learned something from studying the Dharma, not casually, but actually doing all the things, learning to read Tibetan, learning to do all this stuff, doing my practice in Tibetan for decades. And I'm going to share that with you. That quote, my teacher, his name is Khenpo Katar Rinpoche. He died, he was 96, he died in 2019. Explained this to me, that astrology is one of the limbs of the yoga, and they all the Tibetans carry an astrological calendar and use it. And I used to just bug them, sorry to say, but I finally found out that none of the ones I met, to my knowledge, unless they weren't telling me, knew how to calculate it. They just know how to use it. And so what my teacher is saying here says astrology is one of the limbs of the yoga. I mean, it's a legitimate thing, and the Tibetans are totally into it, but it's not the root. The Dharma is the root. And I'm going to try to explain. This is my own way of talking about it. Imagine we have a sphere covered with water, driven by winds in quiet places. And on that sphere is a single sailboat. That's astrology. By setting the sails on the sailboat, we can sail from one place on the globe to any other place. And that globe is what the Buddhists call samsara, this cyclic world of ups and downs that we live in. And what they're trying to say is that astrology is extremely useful in a relative sense, not in a permanent sense, not in a wisdom sense, but it's a practical skill it's very beneficial to humans, and we should be proud of that. However, it's only functional in samsara, in a relative truth of subject and object. It's never going to take us to the center of the sphere. Only the Dharma can do that. Only that kind of non-dual wisdom of being able to totally immerse ourselves in the present moment, and so on. So I just share that with you because when I heard that from him and I thought about it for a while, it was really helpful because I was always trying to make astrology be everything, do everything. It's not. It does enough, and it does a lot, but it's not a subject to learning about the nature of our own mind. And if I had to, if someone asked me, well, what's missing in modern astrology? What I would say is that what's missing is that we all act as if, just as we came out of the box, that we're good to go. Our mind is perfect. And of course, the Tibetans are pointing out, that's not true. The mind needs to be disciplined and trained. I don't see that kind of training being done much. More so, I love the ones that are doing it, just because we need it so badly for our whole community, that we go and train our mind, then use it, not just assume that just as we have it, we're going to be bright enough and trained enough in order to make the right decisions and stuff like that. I call that out. I say that's not the truth. It's not the truth as I found. It certainly wasn't true for me. I had to go do what I call the purification practice. It's called the Nundro, which is like years of work, 100,000 frustrations to limber you up, 100,000 mandala offerings of sand, and it goes on and on and on. And when I was all done, I went to my teacher and said, I'm done. I'm ready to do the more advanced practices I want to do. And he says, well, you know what I would do if I were you, Michael? What can you say to your teacher? I said, no, but I want to know. He says, I would do another Nundro. I'd do it all over again. And I did, and it helped. So I just share this. I know that maybe I'm not supposed to share this stuff with you, but hell, I'm not going to get much older. So it's now or never, right? And these are the things that mean a lot to me. I can't say enough about Dharma training. It's unbelievable. And in Dharma training, we learn first to meditate in what's called shamatha, or tranquility meditation. But then that is followed by vipassana, which means insight meditation, which is really unbelievable. And the way I teach that when I teach Dharma stuff is simply this. Imagine you're trying to thread a very fine needle, but with shaky hands. The tranquility meditation, shamatha, is how we steady the hands so that we can thread the needle, which is insight meditation. Insight meditation is a non-dual meditation, a total immersion in it with perfect clarity at the same time. You don't pick it up. You have to have it pointed out to you by an authentic teacher. And then it still takes work and work and work and work. But most interesting thing, most important single, aside from my family and stuff, nothing is like that. I live to do that each day, just because nothing else is as good. And it's, anyway, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so I think that we could take some questions. Do you have any? Anyone? Maybe Sam, are you still there?
Yeah, there are plenty of questions.
Well, why don't you start? Is this a good time?
Yeah, if you want to pause it, it's up to you.
What? No, I don't want to pause. I just want to field the questions, right? To hear what people are asking. And you can be right there so I can see and, see you and stuff.
Let me go back. The one key question is, what about seeing some of these in geocentric charts? Oh,
Yeah,
and
well,
one other thing before you do that, people want to know more about the discount codes you mentioned.
do you want me to show? Well, I'll just put it on the screen. How's that?
Yeah, and where they can get the free books and everything.
Well, we did it. We did go through it. This is. Can you read this? Spirit
Yes.
Grooves. That's my site.
.net. Okay.
.net or .com, and then there you have free books. Then if you go,
Hmm.
if I press that, then what happens? I go to astrology, or you can go to Dharma, photography, fiction, posters, music. I have 300 and some books on rock and roll posters, which very few people would be interested in, but I am. So then you'll have a long list of 56 books like solar flares, sunstorms, vision of the eclipse, which is a really fascinating one, and on down. There's 56 books. They're all for free. I see no point in trying to either publish stuff. It takes forever. I just put it out there as the best I can, and it's free. And as it is, no one's interested in it anyway, hardly. So I gave up trying to charge a long, long time ago. So, okay, is that clear?
That's the discount codes.
Yep, coming up. Just got to remember where I put it. It's hard to find. I'm working on it. There we
Okay.
go. There it is. It's this one right here. It'll save you $100. I went to David and Faye Cochran, who now own my company, and they own Cosmic Patterns as well, and said, what can we do for you guys, right? I mean, if I'm going to do this and talk about the program, I don't want a kickback. I just want you to give them a break. So that's the break. I'll just leave it there. People can copy it down, save $100. What's another question?
The question one that I asked about, but what about the pictures using geocentric charts? Do you do that
Oh
or
yeah.
no?
No. What you have to do enough homework, and you can do it just with your eyes. You can just look to understand, go back and forth between your geochart and your helio chart, make it on a whole chart patterns, just like I've done. Like you see here, there's a pattern there. Then that's my geocentric chart. But if you study and realize that what is the geocentric chart? The geocentric chart is simply a view of the mothership, which is the solar system, from Earth. Earth looks at an oblique angle at the solar system. And so my question to you is, wouldn't you like to have a picture of your mom? Wouldn't you like to know more about the system you're taking a picture of? I mean, because the geochart is nothing more than just a chart of a view of the solar system. But wouldn't you like to know how the planets actually gravitationally work? And once you do that, you realize, oh, these patterns don't change. They change in a very regular way. They don't go retrograde. They don't go direct and back and forth. And then I've done, I don't know, tens and tens and tens and tens of thousands of charts just because I'm interested. Less so lately, but for years, totally. And what I found out was that the helio patterns stand up. They're really solid. And the geo ones are much more wishy-washy because they aren't representing the structure of the actual solar system. And I could get a little poetical with you or something. I'll try not to. I could just simply say the sun is not just a big hot ball of gas, right? We are part of the sun. The nature of the sun, the essence of the sun is communicated to Earth every day by sunshine and also by solar wind, and also subject to sudden bursts of energy. We know that these sudden bursts of energy can affect radio signals, shortwave radio signals, electrical grids. I know that. That's an interesting. What I've studied is what does it, how does the sudden intense bursts of energy from the sun affect us psychologically and emotionally? And this is the same thing that Landscheid did. And it very much, it affects our creativity at times when we're just overcome with the desire to know or do something or to see something. Where do you think all that stuff comes from? You just think it comes from inside your brain, but that the Earth and the solar system and the universe stuff are just a background sheet? I mean, no, we're all one. That the energy from the galaxy or the super galaxy is all stepped down somehow. I don't know, maybe through gravitational radiation. I have no idea. But all of that energy is stepped down to our sun and then communicated from the sun to us. And that, I have to laugh. The people saying looking for intelligent life. We are intelligent life. We're already out there in the solar system. We've never been anywhere else. And it's looking through whatever it is there, it's looking through our eyes around, just like I'm looking at this monitor here. So I can't make people see it that way, but that's the way I see it. I had a dream back in the 70s. I was studying Alejandro minutely. And in that dream, Jandro came to me in a dream, but it was like realer than real. And all he did was take his hand and throw it up and said, let's try this one. How do I do it? Look, he said, and stalks came out of it, light came out of his eyes, and I looked, and there was the center of the galaxy and the whole plane of the galaxy, just brilliantly lit up. We never even look. Anyway, you got the idea? But anyway, try to finish that up is, yes, I've looked at so many different charts, and it's always interesting that it's not that the geocentric chart are not effective, don't affect us. Of course they do. What it is that they are not as stable and sure as the heliocentric patterns. And you're just as much, that's just as much as part of you as the Earth is part of you. I know that, yeah, people don't want to think that way, but I think that way. So does that help? So I look at them, but I don't compare them. That they're, when I do a reading, I always look at the heliocentric chart first. And this will shock you. Sometimes we never even get to the geochart because there's so much information that if you're skilled, that you can give to someone that they never had before. That the geocentric chart is very important. The geocentric chart is going to show you the circumstances in which you live, the karma. As I said, the personality you have, the self that you've pulled together from your loves and dislikes and likes. But it's not going to tell you enough about, I guess, what religion covers, although I don't think Buddhism is a religion. The nature of who is it that's incarnating here in that chart. That's what you get out of the heliocentric chart. Make sense? What's another question?
So another question is, what orbs do you use for heliocentric charts?
Yeah. I wish we had another time. I have a whole system of what's called phase charts. The point is, I stopped using orbs a long time ago, and I especially don't want to use orbs on a computer because I don't know if I can show you. I don't have the right stuff here to show you, but the point is, you want to know where a given planet is in its orbital cycle, either around another planet or to itself. And if you fail ignorance by a meter or a foot, that means if your orb is just 1 degree more, and then you say, oh, it's not an orb. But then you say, well, where is it then? If it's not an orb, where? Oh, well, it's just outside orb. Well, then it's just outside of an orb, but it's still more to that orb than anything else. That's what I've learned. And it's been done me really in good stead. Yeah, I don't do it like that. So I used to do it exactly. Of course, I've computerized it totally as much as anyone could dream of, but I banned it in totally. I just want to know roughly where you are, where the planet is. Like if it's a lunar cycle, I want to know. Let's just take the lunar cycle, which we all know something about. If you're going to throw a party, and I say, well, throw it at this 90 degrees. Is it 90 degrees before the full moon or 90 degrees after? Total difference. One is building, one is forming, the other is tearing down and going away. This whole idea, the whole idea that people that I always use phase angles, right? What phase is it in? Is the trine applying or separating? Totally different. I mean, not a totally different degree. I mean, the nature of it's the same, but it's either coming to be or being torn down. So we're either building or tearing it down. So that's how I look at auras. But I would have to have a really whole time like this to show it to you. And I developed a chart that I don't know if any. Oh yeah, Blue Star has it. It's called a phase chart, where you can arrange all of your applying, separating, so to see which parts of the whole are accenting. But that's too much to get into here.
Speaking of Helio, do you use asteroids and other centaurs? Do you use other bodies
But
in Helio?
yeah, of course you can use asteroids. And my point is that I'm what I call your lazy astrologer, in the sense that the astrology that I come up with for myself, it has to work for me, or I won't use it. If I end up working for it, like my dear friend, one of my closest friends was Charles Harvey from Great Britain, was a great astrologer and a great human being. When we talked together, he said, well, he's a cosmobiologist. He said he would spend 6 hours preparing for a reading. I said, I don't even spend a minute other than to calculate the charts. I mean, because I don't do that, and I'm not about to do that. I go for, I hate to say this thing, but it's a common phrase, low-hanging fruit. I want the stuff to work for me. I want it to work really well and quickly. And I don't, that's just how I approach it. I mean, I don't know if that's helpful, but I think it's good to hear what other people do who've done it for a long time. And I'm sure we each have different rules we come up with. Is that helpful or not?
I would have to get back from the Aquarian. I think so. Yeah, because I'm just repeating the questions. They're not.
That's cool.
I guess the other question, I think I know the answer to this, but when you say geocentric, are you using sidereal or tropical?
You can use either one. Doesn't matter. It's your choice.
But when you do it, what are you doing? Because someone thinks you're using sidereal.
The Tibetans use tropical. I use tropical because it's convenient, but you have to remember that I wrote a whole book on where everything is. I know where everything is, so that it doesn't matter for me because I know where all the matter is in the universe, right? Because I charted it and programmed it so that when I look at it, it's like, I don't care if it's, the galaxy is where the galaxy is, either one. Super galaxies where the super galaxy is, whether it's tropical or sidereal. And with sidereal is all the different ion amshas, which are pain in the butt for me. And one time we had, my house next door had 8 bedrooms in it, and it still is a center. We had the Hare Krishna, the head of the Hare Krishna astrology. We had a Sanskrit scholar. We had a jazz critic. Gary Duncan was there, who did equations on lunar theory for Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and on and on and on. Everyone's different. So that's how I don't know if that's helpful or not.
I think someone will need to check.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, someone needs to weigh in who asked that question. They know who they are.
Well, they could, yeah.
So someone is asking or saying Tibetans use animal astrology. How is this connected with Western astrology?
Well, first of all, it's not Western astrology, so it's not connected in that way. Does it deal with cycles? Yeah, astrology is basically, first of all, let's talk about what is astrology. First of all, what I can say about that is that astrology is not primarily predictive, in my opinion, and this is why. Astrology is basically what Moby Dick called cultural astronomy. Moby Dick was an astrologer, J.H. Jacobs' father. If you tell me when the conjunction of Saturn and Uranus is, cultural astronomy attempts to tell you what it means. And we can agree to differ and find our differences in what it means, and we do. But I've never been, well, I could say this. One time I had a conference of all financial astrologers. They all came to Big Rapids. I won't name their names because I'm going to say something that's not necessarily flattering. But they were the greatest ones that we have, and wonderful people. But almost to a man or a woman, they didn't have the money to get there. I was paying for train tickets under the counter, bus tickets, when they're supposed to get there on their own steam. These people were advising others how to take care of themselves financially. But I would think that if I could do that, I would first make myself $1 million. But this wasn't the case. These guys didn't have any money. A couple of them did. I'm just saying that's not encouraging. So I don't find that astrology is primarily, I'm not saying that I don't have friends who do it. I do have friends that, but a lot of them are more almost entertainers. But maybe I could say, my teacher used to say, don't say nobody knows, just say you don't know. I don't know. I don't know how to make $1 million. Otherwise I do it. So I don't think that astrology is predictive aside from astronomy is totally predictive, right? We have no trouble. All astronomy is absolutely predictive. Our job is to try to explain what the astrological events, like new moon, full moon, whatever, what does that mean? That's our job. But that's my understanding of astrology. Astrology is cultural astronomy, but it depends entirely on the astronomy, not anything else. But see, I may just be, a shot in the dark, right? That's my view. Does that make sense? I mean, I don't find it to be a predictive science or science of any kind, other than astronomy is absolutely scientific, absolutely precise. I mean, I can measure and have programmed the moon down to the 10th of a second of arc. But then I ask you, well, okay, full moon, which is today or soon. What does that mean? That's where we would come in. Sam, I'm sure you'd have your idea of what a full moon or this full moon is, and I would have mine. And we agree to differ. And that's where we find our differences. And we tolerate it in each other. But how does it affect the regular world? Well, I think not so good, in the sense that in my life, I've gotten to know tens of thousands of astrologers because of business. Most of them did not have enough money. And not even that, but often resented their fellow astrologers getting ahead because they weren't ahead. And I can't say I blame them. I'm just saying maybe it's not so much anymore because I'm not out in the, going to conferences and stuff, but not the best sign. Not the best sign of success. I think astronomers are much more successful than they used to be astrologers. What happened, right? Something happened, and I'm saying that we failed to take the empowerment of heliocentrics. Of course, I say that because, as you say, people say, I'm a heliocentric astrologer, right? No, I think it's true that somewhere we missed a step way back there 500 years ago or so, whenever it was. And astronomers marched on with two charts that they could use and compare to one another. We work on with the same old chart we got now, nothing wrong with that chart, but we need to be able to compare it to other views in order to get a three-dimensional picture of the whole deal. That's my view.
All right. Well, thank you for stopping to take some of our questions. Is there anything else you were going to elucidate on?
How are we on time? What's the time situation?
So you have about 8 minutes.
Oh, well, is there any other questions? I mean, what would I want to say? I'll just say the thing I said before again, and I learned this from when I was young. I liked to read, and I still like to read, but I like to read the diaries of famous people. And one of the diaries that I read very carefully was Franz Kafka, the author, the German, Austrian, or whatever he was. And somewhere in his diaries was this one sentence. And the moment I read it, I spent years trying to figure it out. And what he said was, and I quote, each line that I write, it already has perfection. And I said, whoa, what's that? And I slowly realized that instead of, like so many authors, trying to go out there and become a better author, Kafka was more concerned about developing his mind. He purified his mind so that anything that he did, it already carried a reflection or a stamp, an imprint of that. And I've spent many years, many decades, trying to train my mind. In my case, using the Tibetan approach, which I was very interested in Native American, but the lineage isn't intact. In fact, just recently I had a great realization that, gee, if we want to know what's going to happen, what is the religion of this country, and what is the land? I'm very interested in the land, local space, earth lords and Tibetan thing. The land shows us, it grows out of itself beings. In this case, it's Native Americans. We should really study the Native American view and rituals. And I tried to do that, but I ran into some trouble. One of the things I wanted to do, and I think this is funny, I wanted to do the round dance. I wanted to dance. I wanted to go get up. I'm 80 years old. I wanted to get up and dance. And I have three friends that are pretty close. And I talked to them. I said, can I do that? And they thought about it. I said, well, you can do that, but you really shouldn't. These days, you really should just be a spectator. I think it's come to that. That's not a compliment to Native Americans, because Tibetans aren't like that at all. I mean, I've been to Tibet twice, and kids, dogs, everything's all in there. But I think that with Native Americans at this point, they've been hurt in so many ways, and it's such a fragile state that they don't really feel good about someone like myself getting up and dancing with them, just a white person, etc. Now, this may be a little rough, and you certainly don't have to agree with me. I'm sort of saying that I don't see enough of a lineage there, but I'm certain that this land has produced in them an intact lineage. Whether it's intact now, I can't say, but I'm very interested. I would be studying the Native American stuff if I could find an integral way of doing it. But I haven't been able to. So I've gone the Tibetan route, and their lineage is very much absolutely intact, and they don't mince words and they don't blink. And I've been able to learn enough about my own mind that I've been able to discipline it. And if we had another time, I'm very interested in what's called tertons, treasure finders, people that can go in the mind and bring from the mind treasures that have never been revealed, and then go through the process of understanding them, experiencing them and realizing them to the point they can be shared with others. Now that may sound a little Greek, but anyway, that's my kind of my point of view. And you can always write me, just michael@erlewine.net. We can argue. And I post on Facebook every day and have since 2007. I'm glad to talk and discuss. I find that people don't discuss hardly anything except politics and stuff like that, which I find really painful.
One last question before we go, and then there's some other things I want to share with you. The cards you're using for the star types, are those available to purchase or only in your book?
They're in the books, but they're digital. I mean, you could easily print them out and cut them out, but you'd have to go to trouble. But imagine the trouble that I went through to create this whole thing. I mean, it's mind-boggling how much time it took to simplify this so that someone could actually use it and learn it myself. So, but yeah, you could do. I've thought of doing it, but then it's so much in me, I don't need it. But they're in the books.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what I thought, but someone asked the question.
Sure.
A lot of people are saying, and I actually agree with them, thank you. Thank you for sharing your wisdom.
Okay.
What I just want to say, since you revealed it, because I wasn't going to start off that way, when you had your stroke and I saw it on Facebook,
Yeah.
just 2 days ago, I was like, oh, I don't think Michael's going to speak, but let me ask him because he's Michael. So, and sure enough, you agreed to speak, and I just want to thank you for that, and that you stay on the mend. That this speaks to your character and speaks to who you are. Like I said, I've written for you. I wrote the Jupiter report.
You did.
With you initially, and then now it's with David and Faye.
Yeah.
So you just do remarkable work, and we really appreciate you being here. And yeah, and everyone, thank you for coming out. As we said, we don't share the slides. I don't know if Michael is going to send anything to ISAR for our own posterity, but it will be in our library. And if I've talked to you about this privately, then you know. But yeah, but thank you, Michael, for sharing your work and your thoughts.
Yeah, I've had three strokes.
Wow.
The last one was not this one, but the one before was a big one. I would love to talk about that. I learned an enormous amount about that, about samsara. I learned that almost all of my life is taken up in entertaining and being entertained. And my inability to, when I had the big stroke, this last one was a little stroke, but not nice. When I had the big stroke, I was unable to hide myself, what we call ourself, which is a bunch of attachments and things we love and don't love, were completely wiped out. And I was that way for weeks. And it was like I was out on a plane, absolutely flat plane, and way up above my head was a brilliant, brilliant light that I couldn't stand to look at. And I realized this is exactly what happens in the Bardo. And that and my teacher, my Dharma teacher, just laughed and he says, great, he says, that's really good preparation for you when you die. But the sad part for me is that I realize that we're not ready for the Bardo. And I wasn't ready. I can always say that. I wasn't ready. It's not a walk in the park. It's something that's very demanding. And that great light, you know what that light was? That light was, how to say it backwards. All I wanted to do was to get back into my samsaric thing and hide in the darkness of samsara, and it had been just stripped away from me. I told this to a bunch of doctors, neuropathologists, whatever they were. It was so funny. They stood around there with their eyes open. They never heard anything like this. At the end of them, one of them, the main one that did the operation on me, I had to have a monitor put into my chest. He gave me his home phone number and said he has been having trouble with his wife, and could I talk to him? So I just think that was funny. To me, that was humorous, but it was also amazing how little even doctors, like my heart doctor, knows nothing about food. Nothing at all. I mean, eating stuff that's just the worst stuff in the world. I'm not trying to go on a rant. I'm just sort of saying, this world is too much with us, as I say. It's amazing. So anyway, I thank you for welcoming me, and maybe we can do it again sometime.
Yeah, I hope so. One thing, some people are having trouble getting into spiritgrooves.com or .net. That is the website, right?
Well, that's totally. Hang on a second. Let me just see for myself.
Yeah, we're having some trouble. Some people are trying to get in and mentioning that.
Well, they
I guess they
shouldn't.
just want to confirm they have the right thing.
Well, they may not have the right thing. So let me just
Right.
see. I'll just go to it. It may. No, there it is.
Okay.
It's slow.
Maybe that's it. Maybe it's
It's a little slow, more than normal, but that's what it looks.
Okay.
Can you see? Is it still? Can
Yeah,
you
we
see
see
it?
it. Yeah, and
Yeah.
then I guess we just need to not have the HTTP. Maybe that's what it is.
It
I
could.
don't know, but I'm in now.
And
All
then,
right. Well, thank you.
let me
Yeah.
just. I'll click there. So here's the free ebook. Go there.
Mhm.
Then these are all astrology books. Here's
Wonderful.
what.
Yeah, I've directed people to this site before,
Right.
because not many astrologers have opened up their treasure troves like you have. So I appreciate it very much.
Cool. All right. Be cool, everyone.
Well,
Nice to
yeah, be cool. Thank you,
yeah.
everybody.
And write me. Sure. Okay.
All
See you
right.
later. How do I
All right.
end it?
Thank you. No, I'll close out. Don't worry
All
about that. I can do
right.
that.
Okay.
That's the easy
Okay.
part. Bye, everyone.